So last week we got a Pokemon presentation in which they showed off a bunch of mobile games, a bunch of things that looked interesting. I'm really excited for the Pokemon TCG mobile app. It looks like it might be something along the same lines as like the Yu-Gi-Oh! Master Duels, which I really enjoy. So that's been something I've been actually wanting for a while. So I'm glad to be seeing that. But I think the big killer announcement is Pokemon Legends 2, ZA. Like a lot of us were really concerned that Pokemon Legends would not be getting a sequel, but it seems like we are. We are getting a new Pokemon Legends game, and I cannot be more happier because I could not be happier because this Pokemon Legends was one of my favorite Pokemon games ever. It's probably one of my favorite games on Switch now. It's Pokemon targeted towards an older demographic, right? It's something that a lot of people have been wanting for a long time, but this seeing us get a sequel, set in Kalos, set in Gen 6, set in Lumio City, right? And a location that I think was very underutilized in the original X and Y. Like, seeing us finally get Pokemon Z, like, all these years later is a really, really exciting thing, right? So many people are making memes about how, like, oh, we've waited 12 years for this and stuff like that. It's been 3,000 years, right? Like, it's a crazy, like, nostalgic flashback. Like, so many people I've seen, like, are telling me that, like, wow, like, Pokemon X and Y were my first Pokemon games, and we're going to go back to Kalos. Like, this is, I think, going to be a really big thing for a lot of people, especially since, and I think this is really interesting. The fact that Legends was as downplayed as it was to begin with. Legends Arceus was heavily downplayed when it first came out, right? The Game Awards didn't acknowledge it all. Nobody really talked about it. Like, to me, for a long time, it felt like it went under the radar. But, seeing this get announced and seeing how many people are genuinely thrilled that we're getting more Legends content, like, I do think this is going to be a fan favorite Pokemon spinoff series, right? Like, I do think this is a really good thing for Game Freak to do. And I do think it is going to usher in the era in which people finally start moving on from the fact that this idea that Game Freak is a bad developer, right? Like this myth, right? This is a thing that's been going on for the past couple of years, where like people are pretending that Game Freak is one of the worst developers in the industry, that they're terrible, that they ruined the Pokemon IP, that they don't know what they're doing, that Nintendo hates them. They've been pushing this narrative for a very, very long time, and all it is, they're like 10 years behind where Nintendo was at 10 years ago, right? Because if you look at like where Game Freak is at now, like it it looks an awful lot like what people were doing with Nintendo back in like the later Wii U years and the Wii U years especially, right? Like it feels like the same kind of energy where people think that like, oh, they can no, actually all throughout the Wii era, right? All throughout the Wii era, all throughout this like insanely profitable, successful time for Nintendo, right? Everyone was coming out saying, "Oh, this is terrible. The Wii is like the worst of the three consoles. Like it has no games. It's gimmicky. It's this." Like people like through all these reasons that the Wii was terrible, right? That the DS was terrible. Oh, the PS Vita is way better. The PlayStation P was way better. The PS3 was way better. Oh, like, and then like what happened? Nintendo won that console generation hands down. And even now, you don't really see people admit that. Like you have people like in denial about that to this day. Even with like PlayStation not producing handhelds anymore and Xbox now in the position where they're like about to phase out their console brand entirely. No, it's Nintendo that's struggling, right? We're seeing the same exact thing with Pokemon, right? Where they're doubling down on their stuff. They're becoming more and more popular. They're fixing the problems with the anime. They fix the problems with like the mainline games. They're producing stuff for like older audiences now. They're still doing the things they've always done that have always made them successful. Like they're getting bigger and more successful, and yet there is a lot of coping and seething about it, right? And I think the pinnacle of that was early this year, where for 2 weeks, people pretended that Palworld, the game from Pocket Pair Studios, was going to be a Pokemon kill, right? And I told you what was going to happen when that game came out. It's going to light up because everybody desperately wants to find some kind of Pokemon killer to latch onto. It's gonna be talked about. It's gonna be a flavor of the month game, and then it's gonna drop off really quickly and be completely forgotten. Not only did that happen, that happened like quite a bit quicker than I expected, right? It was not a flavor of the month game, right? Like I thought we would be talking about it like at least a little bit when it came to Pokemon presentation time, right? I was really wondering like, are we going to be comparing Pokemon Legends ZA to Palworld, right? I was legit speculating that. And then, like, it actually happens. The Pokemon presentation drops, and not a single person brings up Palworld at all, right? Not a single person addresses Palworld because everyone knows, like, the game is not going to have a resurgence. It's not going to get a sequel. It's not going to, like, be this big juggernaut thing, right? That game came out, was big with streamers for stupid reasons, and then it just popped off. And I think it's a really good example as to what's wrong with like the modern gaming industry, right? Where people aren't talking about actually good games, right? Like the games you see on social media, the stuff you see with the VTubers cover, like the general YouTubers, like the community Twitter, like these are games that'll get you clicks. These are games that'll get you engagements. And the major thing that will get you engagements right now is saying that Game Freak is done and that Pokemon is like a declining brand, right? But I think with like seeing the genuine like enthusiasm for Pokemon ZA, right? For seeing like where the game is going here, I released a statement saying it's like probably going to be my favorite game in 2025, honestly. Like seeing all the genuine enthusiasm for this, like I have to wonder like how much longer can this narrative last? Because like this is going to be another Gen 1 situation, right? In which people for years and years try to tell you that like, oh, only the first generation of Pokemon was good. Everything after that was garbage. Nintendo really lost their way. Like they have to modernize these games. They have to move past turn-based combat. They have to like stop making Pokemon inanimate objects. They have to do this, and this. Like you had so many people screaming about that. And then what happened? Like people kept buying the games, they kept being successful, and like more and more people started realizing that the people who are like crying about Pokemon, crying about Game Freak, don't have any idea what they're talking about, right? That is the reality of the situation right now, right? I talked about this when Power World came out, but I had to talk about this again. Like the people who religiously hate Pokemon are not Pokemon players, right? They don't know anything about the brand. They don't know anything about the IP. They don't know anything about Game Freak or Nintendo or Creatures or the Pokemon Company. They don't know anything about the spin-off games. Like, how many times have you seen people like try to say like, "Oh, I wish they would change the gameplay to Pokemon"? Well, just play one of the spin-off games. Oh, I don't want to play that. Like, it's just coping, right? It's just a justification for their like jealousy of a popular children's brand. Like, how dare Pokemon be more popular than my favorite thing, right? Like that's the mindset that these people are in, right? They're immature little children. They cannot comprehend that Pokemon has maintained its relevancy more than Digimon, more than Yokai Watch, more than like anything else, right? Especially Power World. Like Pokemon has maintained its relevancy for a reason, right? It's not just blind fanboyism. It's not just devotion to the brand. It's because the Pokemon Company has done an excellent job building up a long string of successful properties, right? From the anime to the games, from the TCG to mobile apps to like just spin-off material like Pokemon Mystery Dungeon and Legends ZA, right? There has been so much coping and so much seething about this topic for the longest time, but I do think it's safe to say that Pokemon is absolutely here to stay.